Right. That's right. Again, back to that.
So that could be your tough guy in the schoolyard guy.
Yeah, it's funny, and you're right. And I've always kind of, and just an interesting analogy I'd use, and I hope I don't distract you from your thought, but you mentioned unhappiness or just not very happy people. Or I've noticed that really, really religious people who aren't very, very happy, they tend to seek comfort in their misery or something. There's a purpose for it, there's a reason for it, but they're still generally kind of unhappy. And I've noticed that with a lot of bullies and a lot of the thugs and gang members and whatnot, they're generally kind of they're just not happy. And I used to kind of tell a joke. I used to always kind of, I guess I kind of chuckle and say, have you ever seen how often do you see a terrorist smile? How often do you see a bully smile? And these are things that you don't really see them, that happy.
Well, Osama seems to smile. He doesn't guffaw, but he seems to have a smirk on his face. And the other one that has it is Ahmadinejad from Iran.
Yes.
He always seems to have some sort of grin on his face.
Or maybe it's a smugness, or maybe they're thinking about killing infidels. Hey.
Yeah, I'm not sure what it is, but it's eerie.
Because that's what's eerie to me is that the only time I do see them smile a lot, again, it might be media. Again, I know that these are images I'm getting from the media, but when I do see a lot of individuals in poor situations, whatever, and these fundamentalist religions, when they do smile, they've just blown up a tank, they've just killed somebody, they're killing infidels, they're waving death to America flags, then they're smiling. But when you catch them in their regular habitat, just farming,
they're not
milking.
smiling in response to the things that normal people smile from. It's not that they're not smiling ever.
Well, yeah, pretty much. Seems to be some case. It's a switch or something. It's pretty strange. The things that would make me gasp and go, "Oh my goodness," they're smiling about. And I see that same thing with people who love violence. And I guess that's kind of you're a psychologist. You tell me what's the deal with that?
Well, I think one thing I can tell you is they've done a lot of studies on the impact of religion generally on people's well-being and happiness.
Yes.
And I'm not sure what to make of them. For one thing, I think most of those studies are done by religious people. And although they're social scientists, they are generally looking to show some benefit to being religious.
Okay.
And the end result of this body of research is to show that religion has very different effects for different people, and that it can be useful for a lot of people in coping with life's problems, and that that sometimes they show that they're physically healthier or mentally healthier, sometimes they show that they're worse, sometimes they show that they're the same. So although they've done dozens and dozens, maybe hundreds of studies on this, I'm not sure there's a clear answer, but I know that it does not show clearly that religious people are more miserable. It doesn't bear out
right, I'm sure
of that conclusion. Now, but the psychology, I think, of the extremists, what I would look at is that they tend to be very close-minded people. That they're never open to a new piece of evidence that might be disconfirmatory.
Right.
And that they are also very vulnerable to, if any part of their system somehow is attacked and proven to be untrue,
right,
I think their whole psychology can fall apart. And that's why I think they get so upset when somebody publishes a cartoon, say, about Muhammad, or when somebody says something that they consider blasphemous. I think they somehow feel that if they let a comment like that stand, and if that's printed in the newspaper, and if reasonable people see it and believe it, then maybe it somehow is true. And if something like that could be true, then their whole psychological system is vulnerable.
This is intriguing. This reminds me of the Catholic Church's response to the allegations that Padre Pio was pouring acid on his wounds to keep them open, and automatically, without the church didn't even bat an eye. They're lying.
Right. They can't. That's right. You can't face up to certain things, and that also may be part of what motivates someone to take part in a suicide bombing. That, in other words, if you believe that if you stop believing in your faith, or if there's any doubt whatsoever that this whole stuff that you've been believing is true, then your personality is going to fall apart. Then what happens is, as a way of testing yourself, improving how much you believe it, you've got to actually carry out one of these deeds. And that if you stop at the point just before you do it, then what you're saying is that you have doubt. And if you're saying that you have doubt, then your whole sense of identity and belonging in the world and purpose in the world all falls to pieces. so it becomes a situation where they are, in order to maintain their psychological integrity, they're drawn to carry out the deed. And that I think is one of the mechanisms behind the suicide bomber.
Right. That's why and as a skeptic, that's why I've always argued. People ask me sometimes, why do you do what you do? And I say, well, I do this because, when you think of individuals such as the suicide bomber, if you could, I said the only reason why they do stuff like this is because they're 100% sure. If you could slide in just 1 ounce of doubt, if just a little bit of doubt, they go, well, what if I'm wrong about this? I doubt they pull the trigger.
But I don't think they step back a little. I think if you slide in a little bit of doubt, their whole system starts to fall to pieces.
Right.
And so that's why they're so resistant.
And they'll fight back even harder. Oh, interesting. Right.
And they're often trying to flee from the freedom and responsibilities of life in the modern world. That religion has always provided easy answers to people who need those answers, and that if you're facing all these different choices about what to do and you don't have any really good answers, then somebody who's offering you the answers has gets a lot of strength from that too.
Let's take this next call here. Hello, you're on the air. Thank you for holding.
Hey, how's it going, Dr. Kressel? I just called in, but I have a couple
no problem. Go ahead.
For you.
Sure.
And what I'm wondering is, from a clinical point of view, if what you would think about terrorists as far as narcissistic tendencies or egocentric tendencies. And then also with that, what I was wondering was, as far as Dr. Zimbardo, I'm not sure if you're familiar with him. He did one of the early tests of in the basement, I think, of Stanford.
Sure.
But I was wondering what you think about some of the things he has to say about evil and good and evil and that kind of dichotomy. And I'll just jump off.
All right. Thanks a lot.
All right. Thanks.
Bye.
Well, first of all, to take the question about whether these guys are mentally ill, let me just broaden the question a little bit. I think that one thing, this came up also in my study of the people who carry out genocidal acts, that if you ask any group of people who haven't really studied the topic professionally, you tell them what the Nazis did, and then you ask them what type of people could have done that. They come up with a conclusion that these were very evil people and that these were insane people. And
that is the case sometimes, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, on the other hand, there's first of all, there's a tension between the two of those, because if they're truly insane in the way that we psychologists think about it, if they're suffering from mental illness, if they have some organic problem in their brain, whatever, then it makes it hard to conclude that they are evil.
Of course.
Because they're suffering. But the other thing is, though, that there's very little evidence that that most of the people who have carried out most of the atrocities in modern times have been severely mentally ill. One of the reasons is that if you're talking about trying to organize a genocide, or if you're talking about trying to run a concentration camp, those are managerial type jobs.
Exactly.
Severe mental illness, those people are not capable of doing it. So that the type of mental illness that we're talking about would not be psychosis. It would have to be some type of personality disorder. And I've seen diagnoses, for example, that Hitler is a borderline personality, or that narcissistic, or things like that.
Right.
And I think that stuff in Hitler's case, it may well be true, and there's some sexual dysfunction there, and and when you're talking about some of these terrorists, you have similar things. But the problem is that there are many borderline personalities who don't do that sort of thing, and there are many narcissists whose narcissism doesn't take that form. So I would focus less on the psychopathology and more on the power of the ideology once it takes hold of a mind that may be only slightly different from normal. In other words, I would not predict that people who, if I could have analyzed the various suicide bombers or the membership of Al-Qaeda and analyzed them a number of years back, and I tried to say, well, is there some type of psychopathology here? I wouldn't expect it to be that much different from a normal population in the same society.